after all, one needs to choose between networking and networking at all.
Thank you very much. Greg, in a sentence, your top priority.
The top priority is clearly inclusiveness, particularly at the international level. My call is for the national and the European standardisation bodies to facilitate that at the international level. And I would also say to the Commission, in the case of harmonised standards, you should not be allowing European standardisation bodies to delegate some of that work to the international level unless there is clear inclusiveness in the system. If not, the work should be done here where it can be inclusive.
Thank you. Arnold.
Mine's pretty much the same thing, really. I mean, it's absolutely essential that we lead on standards that embed the concept of safety, privacy and security by design. And sort of moving to inclusiveness, I mean, it is a strength of the European standardization system, and it should be deepened further and continue to be well resourced, which is what you're saying, to ensure it supports the best levels of protection and welfare possible, whilst aiding the global competitiveness of European business. And I think what I have seen through my contacts with Consumers International is how that as developing countries develop, they actually want the same thing as consumers here. So the potential for us to build on that with our standards and pass that out into the world is great, but I do have that concern, as we do in ANEC, that if we're not careful, we could lose some of that inclusiveness if we just let things go and don't have the resources to attend the international meetings.
Thank you. Paul.
Restore the value of European development of harmonized standards by restoring the values of the new approach. So stop dancing on the grave of the new approach with all sort of hooray messages about the joint initiative, which really didn't help a lot, to be honest. But start working on a renewed approach with the stakeholders and allow the European standards organizations to do standardization in a meaningful manner in an international context, as has been working extremely well and serving Europe very well for decades. And by that, avoid that industry players walk away from European standardization, because that is very closely about to happen.
Thank you. Javier.
My comment would go in the line of building in the future more closely a stronger European but joint European position worldwide. I think that individual members, individual countries alone are not strong enough to compete in the current world, to influence, as we said before. But if we advance in that line of coordinating more our messages, our positions, we will have that capacity to influence more.
Thank you very much. Neviana, you have the last word.
Thank you very much. I would like to say that if I have to propose a strategic priority, this will be to strengthen the cooperation on one side between the European standardization organizations, because we need to support the de-siloing of the European standardization system. We haven't discussed this today, but technologies are converging, so boundaries are blurring. And when we are talking about smart manufacturing, when we are talking about artificial intelligence, we can only do the European standards together. And we are facing common work groups, started with Senelec, ETSI is joining.
Cooperate together in Europe and with the international level.
Exactly. And from another side, we also need to strengthen the public-private partnership to help the European Commission also to understand what are the needs of the standardization system, the standardization organizations, of all the players of the industry, consumers, and also from the other side.
We have to stop now, I'm sorry. Quick one, half a sentence.
Okay, so from the other side, we need, by this strengthening of the public-private partnership, we need to rebuild the trust in the European industry experts and to allow them to do their job by creating quality European standards.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking our panel very much indeed. Thank you for a very frank, a very honest, and I think a constructive debate. Thank you. You may return to the comfortable seats. So we are nearly at the end, and apologies for bringing that to a halt, but I did promise we would finish on time, and I know some of you have journeys to make, so we want to make sure we do that, and we need to give you something to eat and drink soon. But it is my great pleasure to welcome back for some closing thoughts, Joachim Núñez de Almeida from the Commission. Joachim, your thoughts on what we've been discussing, what you've been hearing, and the way forward.
Okay, dear friends of standardization, I've got the pleasure to close this conference with some observations that I've noted down from the discussions and proposing what could be perceived as a way forward. But before doing so, I'd like to wholeheartedly thank our Romanian hosts for their welcome and organize the event and ask for a round of applause. It's clear to me that we should continue the work that started under the GIS and take it beyond 2019, especially when it comes to education, raising awareness with public authorities and SMEs, role of standards in public procurement, and in getting, last but not the least, in getting the standard making process right. The first discussion made clear that perhaps we could look for ways to become more systematic in our approach on cooperation among European industry and other stakeholders, focusing on pan-European integrated industrial projects and high value-added manufacturing activities in Europe that require coordinated action. This was my invitation to the standardization community that I made on the first panel. Now, on additional points to add, coming out of Roundtable 1, I would like to first, I leave this event with the full consciousness that from the point of view of European industry, we have not yet got it right as far as the standardization making process is concerned, and that there is a trust issue that is affecting the development of harmonized standards, and that's clear to me. So I'm not singing hooray, as Paul has just said, as far as that one is concerned. Second, I think that from that session I took from Juliana the point that is quite interesting to see how for a country, an economy like Romania, which reminds me of the economy of my own country, Portugal, how to make the local stakeholders feel the importance of standardization and raise the awareness of the importance of standardization for the functioning of that particular society as a big challenge. I was also quite seduced by Christoph's point about the readability of the standard, the issue about the complexity of these 150 pages that multiply increasingly, and you need geniuses to understand the interaction between all these standards, and that it's not so much just about the participation in the standardization process, but also on the readability of the outcomes of the standardization process to make it understandable to the SMEs, which are the ones that need standards most, because everybody knows that big business can get away with conformity assessments in other ways more easily than SMEs. I was also intrigued by the comment that we have to watch out that by going for international standards we are bypassing societally more friendly European standards. It's not something that I had been too much aware of, but I'm happy to look into this. Question driving the second roundtable discussion was very pertinent, and whether the system in Europe is well equipped to deal with global challenges. It's clear that China is bringing Chinese investments and standards into the EU and to EU partners like in Africa under its One Belt, One Road strategy. The US has a different standardization philosophy altogether, seems to have shifted to a more protectionist industrial policy. The question can be answered affirmatively if we manage to better promote the European standardization system at international level and make sure we effectively increase our collaboration multilaterally with organizations such as ISO and bilaterally with our international trading partners. I'll take away from this panel, I would say that this idea of let's use Europe's strong position in the international standardization organizations as a springboard to involve the world more and helping the trade of Europe with the rest of the world. So not be afraid of embracing the world, but rather include them as much as possible. I would also say that the panel, in reaction to the presentation that Tim made, is also a demonstration that it's difficult to get, but you know, it's no fault of theirs to get standardization organizations to think in purely trade policy, political or geopolitical terms. With standardization organizations, the more people sit around the table and do standards, the better it is. So it's difficult to get that logic there. There's this preoccupation from societal representations about ISO, IEC or the international level being less permeable to societal participation, although the views seem to be a bit divergent there. Then the debate about the health status of the new approach also clearly went through panel 4. And again, I think that that's an issue where we haven't yet made peace and defined our roles clearly in a way that everybody recognizes itself in the system. We're still too much shouting at each other. Do I have something more to say? Yeah? Okay, yeah. Close today's conference by reiterating that the European Commission will continue to play its role in the standardization process. And let's continue to join forces, because the pace of change makes it imperative for all of us to try and remain ahead of the curve more than ever. And again, I think that we need to start thinking about collectively what we want to do together in standardization for the next political cycle. And me and my team will be reflecting on that attentively in the months to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Joachim. And if I could ask Juliana to join me just before we close, because I think, Juliana, you wanted to say some thank yous as well. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Jacki, for your excellent work. Two practical elements. Lunch will be provided in the reception hall that the dinner was held yesterday. As you exit the conference room on the right, my colleagues will direct you there. And those who opted for a tour of the palace, guides will be waiting for you at 2 o'clock in front of the reception hall after the lunch. And in the end, I would like to say, dear participants, dear friends, thank you all for participating in this event. It was a privilege for ASRO to organize this 3 days event on standardization, on European standardization. It was not only a privilege, but a great and rewarding experience for me and all my staff. I wouldn't have been able to do it without very good colleagues that committed themselves and were implicated night and days, several days. So I would like to ask you to give a round of applause for all my colleagues. So thank you again, and have all of you from outside Romania a safe trip home.
Thank you very much indeed, Juliana, and thank you to you for all your hard work over the 3 days, and particularly for today. Could I also add thanks to our interpreters for their great work? And could I remind you, a round of applause for our interpreters, please. And could I remind you, please, could you give your headsets back before you leave the room? Please don't accidentally take them away with you. They cost a fortune. So thank you very much to all of you. Lunch is served. Follow the leaders and they will take you there. And I wish you a very pleasant weekend. Thank you.